All right, if we're going to continue our series, if you need a Bible, this would be the chance to get one. So if you want to turn and open the pages and flip them around and do all that, then please raise your hand. If you don't have a Bible of your own, then take this one home. We'd love for you to have a Bible and be able to read it. And if you need help walking through the Bible and how to read it, we want to do that too.
Thanks, Brian. I want to give a little bit of background on where we're heading this morning. Good morning, everybody. Hello, online peoples. We're continuing our series. It's called The King. And it's called The King for a couple reasons. We're going through the books of 1st and 2nd Samuel. And among many other things, it involves the beginning of the monarchy, the kingship in ancient Israel. And also, we call it The King because very specifically, everything in the Old Testament, the entire story of Scripture, specifically 1st and 2nd Samuel, specifically what we're going to talk about today, it points to Jesus as the true king. Even David, who we're going to see specifically in our passage today, be anointed king over Israel, and he fights Goliath, and all the things we maybe have heard before, even all of that, David is the best Israel has to offer, and he still falls short. And the whole situation cries out, somebody fix this. And so as we go into that, I want to keep in mind a couple things as we talk about Jesus. Homework could be read Luke 24. Don't do it right now, but later. What you'll find is Jesus giving us permission. He gave his disciples permission, and we take it from them, to read him into the Old Testament. And what I mean by that is he was very specific with them. He's like, don't you see how this is all about me? All of it. And so we have the privilege after Jesus' life, death, and resurrection to go, with everything we know about him, how is all this pointing to him and anticipating his kingship the whole time? So look out for those things today. So some of the things we know that you'll see kind of embedded in the text, in 2 Samuel chapter 7, which we'll get to in a few weeks, God makes a covenant with David and says, your kingdom will keep on going. And that seems like, well, that's weird because he's going to die someday. And we look at that's about Jesus. Some prophecies in the Old Testament. O Bethlehem, though you are small among the clans of Judah, out of you will come from me one ruler whose kingdom will never end. And David's from Bethlehem, but Jesus was born in Bethlehem. And then you go, okay, well, I see Joseph, Jesus' earthly father, had to go to Bethlehem because he was from the house and line of David. Jesus was born in Bethlehem. He's an ancestor of David. There's all these connections between Jesus and David, not just in their family line, not just in prophecy, but actually what they were facing. So we'll see some of those things today, and very clearly we'll go, hey, what was the author of 1 Samuel chapter 16 and 17 trying to communicate with just this? And then we'll back up. You good? Okay, here we go. What happened? Brian left us last week by the very end. Saul, the first king of Israel, was rejected by God. He was disobedient, so he was rejected. And the first time we hear of God saying someone else is coming that I have picked is in chapter 13. We're going to start in 16, but just put the verse from 13 up there for right now. It says, but now your kingdom, this is to Saul, but now your kingdom will not endure. The Lord has sought out a man after his own heart. Everyone say his own heart. And appointed him ruler of his people because you have not kept the Lord's command. This his own heart, it probably means some of both. Is it like David has God in his heart or God has David in his heart? Probably some of both, but clearly God's like, this is my guy. And what we will see is, yes, he starts out great and he has great qualities and humility and stuff, but he's an utter failure at points in his life. So again, even David, the best Israel has, cries out for someone else, cries out for a true king. And that all anticipates Christ. Okay, so the kingdom has been taken from Saul, and so now at the beginning of 16, God tells Samuel, who's the prophet leader of Israel, I want you to go to Bethlehem. And that's our, if you know Jesus, you're like, Bethlehem, okay, I know this. I want you to go to Bethlehem, and I want you to anoint for me one there who's going to be king. Anoint means pick, chosen, specifically anoint for this role. So he shows up in Bethlehem, and if you don't remember, the prophet leader of Israel would make rounds throughout the year, but this was a special trip to Bethlehem. So everyone there was freaked out because they're like, we're busted. Like we're in such trouble because often we've said that the prophets are called covenant lawyers where they come and go, here's how you're not holding up your end of the bargain, and some real bad stuff's on the way. So they're freaked out, but he says, hey, I'm just here to offer a sacrifice. So he's kind of saying, I'm here to do a couple things. And he invites Jesse's family. So there's that, from the stump of prophecy in the Old Testament, from the stump of Jesse, a branch will bear fruit. So Jesse is David's father, but the branch that bears fruit is, yes, it's David, but it's really pointing to Jesus. So even when you see Jesse, you're like, I know that. So he invites Jesse's family to be a part of this. So Samuel is apparently at Jesse's house in verse 6. So let's pick it up from there. When they arrived, Samuel saw Eliab and thought, surely the Lord's anointed stands here before the Lord. Eliab is David's oldest brother, and he's really tall. Yep. But the Lord said to Samuel, don't consider his appearance or his height, for I've rejected him. The Lord doesn't look at the things people look at. Okay? It is really, really difficult for us, for me, to not see what's physically right in front of me and either be too encouraged or too discouraged, whatever it might be, the present circumstances, and forget the long game that Jesus is not only playing in my life, but with the world. His kingdom is now and not yet. It's still on the way, but it's so difficult not to get derailed by what's in front of me. And so often God is involving us in this grand trust exercise, saying, will you see past what's in front of you and trust me? Will you be willing to try and see this situation with my eyes? Will you look upon this situation and ask, what do I see, instead of telling me what you see and you want me to change?
So good.
And we can ask him to change it. It's both. The Lord doesn't look at things the way we do. And it says, people look at the outward appearance, but the Lord looks at the heart. And this is the first of many examples you're going to see of the spiritual and the physical, of God saying, that's kind of what I'm talking about. So the Lord, everybody's looking at the outward appearance, and God goes, I see something else inside. Often we as humans go, I see the physical, and he knows that. He has empathy for that. He's not judging us for that. He goes, I know this is hard for you, but I want you to try and see what I see, and I don't always look at the outward appearance. And you see, he just picks the underdogs all the time. And David's kind of an underdog, but in some ways, but also he's like really good looking, so it's weird. I wish he was like not good looking, because then he would like be the total underdog, but you'll see why he is. Okay, so 7 sons pass in front of him. None of them are there. None of them are, God keeps going, nope, nope, nope. And Samuel's like, whatever. And so verse 11, so he asked Jesse, the dad, are these all the sons you have? Like, I'm confused. He says, well, they're still the youngest, Jesse answered, but he's tending the sheep. Like, you can't possibly mean him. And this is the underdog thing. He's the youngest. Nobody would have thought that he would have been picked for anything. He's doing the chores and all the stuff. Like, that's why he's the underdog. Send for him, and we won't sit down till he arrives. So he sent for him and brought him in. He was glowing with health and had a fine appearance and handsome features. So he's like really good looking. But then the Lord said, rise and anoint him. This is the one. So Samuel took the horn of oil, anointed him in the presence of his brothers. So all of them are still there. Does that matter? Yep. And from that day on, the Spirit of the Lord came powerfully upon David, and Samuel then went back to Ramah, which is his home. Why does it matter that his brothers are there? Let's be one of the brothers for a second. What are we thinking? Why him? What else? He's the youngest. Are we like super happy? Like, oh my gosh, good for our brother. Nope. Quite possibly jealous, and we see hints of that. And also reminds us of what story? Joseph and his brothers. Not the same, but there is this thing of going, well, look at you, David. Congratulations, you got anointed today. Like, and they don't know for sure. We're not told if they're told in that moment that he's going to be king, but they know the prophet leader of our entire people came to our house and anointed our younger brother after calling him in from tending the sheep. Whatever. David, right? So there's something there. Okay, jump down. So now I want to jump to chapter 17 because I want to get to David and Goliath. So chapter 17, it says the Philistines have come out to march to battle. Okay, and so let's put the image of the valley on the screen. This is the valley of Elah. And this is a modern day picture. Our best guess is this is where it happened. This is the valley right here. And then up on the top of this hill are the Philistines, including Goliath. On top of this hill are the Israels. The Israels are up here, and they're all looking down, and someone's supposed to come in the middle and fight. And so they're all yelling at each other and taunting each other, and have that valley in mind as we look at what happens next. So, verse 4, a champion named Goliath, who was from Gath, came out of the Philistine camp. His height was 6 cubits and a span. Yeah. I hope so much that wasn't a catcall for Goliath's height, because it was like, woo! It's so weird. First of all, he's from Gath. Does anyone remember when we have encountered the city of Gath so far in our journey? Great, I'll remind you. When the ark was captured by the Philistines for 7 months, and it went through the tour of the Philistine towns, Gath was one of them. What happened at each one of those towns is God didn't need an army to show his power. Everybody got sick and had tumors as a gentle, literally a gentle reminder to not come against the one true God. Goliath lived in one of those towns and did not get the message. Like Pharaoh, like many others, like us, when we go through a trial, God, please, God, please, God, please, God, please. Oh, I'm good. He forgot. He didn't listen. This is not what's best for him. This is not what's best for us. God didn't have to be gentle on Goliath and his town. We look and we're like, gentle? Yes. Next, the word champion. So this is what's great. So a champion named Goliath. The literal translation is a man of the between. A man, I want you to remember this, a man of the between. He's the champion. So what that means is, can we put the image back up again? So a man of the between. So the deal was, each side picks a man of the between. The between is down in the valley, between the two armies. Each side picks a champion. Whoever wins, that army wins. And so what happens is only 2 people have to fight, and so it saves a lot of casualty. It saves a lot of resources. So the rules are, send out the men of the between, the champions, have them fight, and whoever wins, we win. So, for our purposes in thinking, what does this mean? And later on, so basically you've got the champions, they're the men of the between, and they're standing between their people and the danger. That's bad. I'm standing between, and I represent us. If I win, we win. If I lose, we lose. If I get overtaken by the bad, we get overtaken by the bad. If I overcome it, we overcome it. I'm the one in between. And so Goliath is out there, and he's waiting on the other one of the between. And so here's what he looks like. Jen, would you mind handing me my glasses? It's just a struggle. It's a constant struggle. Thanks, love. You didn't do that very quickly. Okay. Well, she seemed bummed is what I mean. She seemed kind of bummed, like, oh my gosh. He had a bronze helmet on his head. This is verse 5. He had a bronze helmet on his head and wore a coat of scale armor of bronze weighing 5,000 shekels. By the way, back to 6 cubits in a span. Goliath's height is we're not exactly sure. At the shortest, he was 6'9". At the tallest, he was over 9 feet tall. 6'9" is still really tall. He was also really strong. You'll see in a second. But back then, it would have been considered even taller because everybody was shorter. So 6'9", 9 feet. He's just giant and he's huge and he's really strong. So on his legs, he wore bronze greaves and he had a bronze javelin was slung on his back. His spear shaft was like a weaver's rod and its iron point weighed 600 shekels, which is the point of his spear weighed 15 pounds. The CrossFitter's like, I could do that. Matt, I know you were thinking it. His shield bearer went ahead of him. And so his upper body completely covered, his lower body covered. He has a helmet on his head. Where's the only place he's vulnerable? Right there. His upper armor weighed 126 pounds. So no matter how tall he is so strong. How do we know that's how much it weighed and that it had armor scales like this? How do we know? Because David took it after he wins, spoiler, after he wins, and measured it and weighed it and had a trophy. That's why we know. That's why we know how big it was and how strong he was. So David was very, very humble, but you'll see, he plays the game too a little bit. He knows what he's doing. All right, so Goliath states the rules of the battle again, and then he starts taunting. Verse 10. Then the Philistine said, "This day I defy the armies of Israel." And defy, basically I call out, I taunt, I mock. I mock the armies of Israel. He's making fun of them. "Give me a man and let us fight each other." On hearing the Philistines' words, Saul and all the Israelites were dismayed and terrified. So Goliath comes out every day and night, in the morning and at night, and says the same thing. He's like, "Come on, what are you doing?" And probably his whole crew is laughing on the others, whatever. They can hear the roar, all the things. Does this for 40 days. 40 days. And the only reaction we have from the Israelites, which makes sense to us, they were terrified. Like no one can win. And so not only is one of us going to go be killed, but then what happens to all of us after that? We're in their service. Like this we don't know what to do for 40 days. During that time, David is at home because he's still with the sheep, so he's not on the battlefield with his brothers. And his dad sends him to give them some food. Go send your brothers food. It's been a long time. They probably need something, some cheese. So he brings it to him. And then, cheese is one of the things. It's in the text, Jason. So verse 26, David asked the men standing near him, "What will be done for the man who kills this Philistine and removes this disgrace from Israel? Who's this uncircumcised Philistine that he should defy the armies of the living God?" So David's got some smack talk in him. Literally, he's like, this uncircumcised guy, like he doesn't follow God. And so David's going up and down the battle line going, "What are you guys doing?" But the first thing he says is, "What's going to be done for the person who kills him?" So all of them have been terrified for days. David comes for 2 seconds. He's like, "What happens when we kill him?" Now, he's also pretty smart. He's like, what happens after I kill him? Like, what do I get? So there's a little bit of both going on, but his heart is righteous anger for the Lord. All right. So he keeps on asking, and finally his oldest brother, he comes to his older brother to ask him the same question, and his brother goes, "I know how conceited you are and how wicked your heart is. You've only come to watch." So this is one of those places we go, was this out of that place of going, David the Anointed? And you're coming here, but probably there could be some shame from his oldest brother. David comes up, he's like, "What are you doing?" Like, he's making fun of our God. And his brother's like, Now, could there have been pieces in his life where his brother said, David's conceited and his heart's wicked and all this kind of stuff? I guess, but that's not what God says about his heart. So we got to take those together and go, well, it seems like David's brother's ashamed and he's jealous, and it's like, get out of here. And you're bringing attention to all of us. We don't know what to do. It's been 40 days. We would have all been scared. Like, it's rough, And so he keeps asking, and finally, Saul hears about David. He hears about him. He's like, what's that guy's deal? And so David, he asks him to come in. And so in verse 32, David is in Saul's presence, and he says to Saul, "Let no one lose heart on account of this Philistine. Your servant will go and fight him." Saul says no because of this. Like David's 20-ish. He's like, "No, we're not doing this." And David goes, No. I can do it because anytime one of my sheep has been caught, 2 times, when my sheep were caught by a lion and a bear, God helped me defeat them. And he's going to do the same thing with this Philistine who has no respect for our God. David's saying, I've seen what God did in the past, and I believe he's going to do it again. Sometimes that means, in our lives, we're jumping ahead a little bit, but sometimes that means he might change your circumstance like he has in the past. Sometimes it means his presence is going to be enough if he doesn't change it. It's both. Like I've seen him be with me or change it. Both of those things are enough for me. But David is going, hey, I've seen him do it before. And so Saul goes, and all of his leadership goes, okay, take my armor. So as the king, now it doesn't mean the king didn't have to be the champion, but Saul was the tallest. If you remember, he's a head taller, 6 to 12 inches taller than everyone else. And he's like, here, yes, young man, take my armor out there when you fight. And so it just this contrast of righteous anger and trusting what God might want to do, even if he dies. My guess is David's like Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Even though he knows he's going to win, but even if I don't, you're not going to defy the God of Israel. That's what his heart seems to be like. Saul says, here, take my armor. David puts it on, and he's like, this doesn't fit. And he's like, I'm not using this, so I'm going to use my 5 smooth stones and my slingshot. And so you can put up a picture of his slingshot, and I have one here too. And I have stones, and I'm going to sling them at you. So it's like a little basket on the end, because did you always, when I was growing up, until I started trying to read the Bible, I thought it was a slingshot, but no, this is a weapon. So it is. So there's a little basket, and then you put this part on your middle finger, and you take this part, and you just hold it, and then he slings it around really, really fast, and then just lets it go. So I'm going to take a marshmallow, and I'm going to see if I can hit Bill Mims in the hands. But I'm going to do it really slow. Bill, you ready? You're laughing, but this is coming at you. Ready? Watch out, Brian. Here it comes. Okay. That was, if the chair wasn't there, that was going right in his hands. Can you guys, right? That's not terrible. Thank you. So that was, it really was close. So you can do it really fast. This is going to be spastic because Jen wouldn't let me practice enough yesterday. You weren't. You're like, don't do that.
You weren't doing marshmallows. You had rocks.
I had rocks because I wanted to feel what it felt like. It's hard to be accurate with a marshmallow, which is why what I just did is amazing. So I'm going to take off Hannah's head. I'm going to do it as hard as I can. Whoa! Okay, just so you know, I chucked a marshmallow the length of the building over there earlier when I was back there practicing, and it was awesome. So think about a whole stone being as big as a baseball and it going over 100 miles an hour. Like, because think about this is a pitcher can throw 100 miles an hour. The inertia of this is going way faster than that. And deadly accuracy. If you look online, they can take the top of a Coke bottle down from like 100 yards. It's amazing. Like, so you get good at it, just like me. Okay, here we go. So he goes, I'm just going to go out there with this. I don't need anything else. And verse 41, here we go. Meanwhile, the Philistine with his shield bearer in front of him kept coming closer to David. He looked David over and saw that he was a little more than a boy. So he's not a boy, but that gives us another hint. Like he's probably a young 20. You know, you meet some kids in college, you're like, you don't have your man body yet. Like it seems like our son was like that. He's a late bloomer. You're like, you're almost there. Well, you know what I mean. Grant knows that. He has a man body now? Whatever. This is weird. He was glowing with health and handsome. So oddly enough, Goliath's like, he's really handsome. And he despised him. And he said to David, am I a dog that you come at me with sticks? And the Philistine cursed David by his gods. Come here, he said, and I'll give you your flesh to the birds and the wild animals. I want you to think again about everybody watching. You can put the graphic up again if you don't mind. The author is being very clear. Think about if you read the Old Testament, New Testament, often in one verse, 100 years can go by, 50 years. We've got 2 chapters where this much time has passed, and now in this chapter, moments, verse after verse, it is very clear that the author goes, this is a pivotal moment spiritually, physically for the nation. This is a big deal. As I write my testimony about God and did not set out to go, everything happened in this chronological way, I set out as the author to go, this is what God was like for our nation. This was really important. And so you think about, can you put the valley up? So think about everybody watching and what this means for everybody on each hill. This is everything. And they watched Goliath come out, and then some of them didn't even know who David was. Like, you got to be kidding me. Seriously. But what a witness to them. What a witness to them who stood there for 40 days with good reason. So he heads out. David said to the Philistine after they meet in the middle, you come against me with sword and spear and javelin, but I come against you in the name of the Lord Almighty, the God of the armies of Israel, whom you have defied. Once again, the physical and the spiritual, David is naming it. You're huge. You've got armor. I see your spear and javelin. I don't need it because my God is stronger than that. I don't know how he's going to do this, but he's going to do it. And I trust him. And I am stepping out in trust because I believe he's done this before and he's going to do it again. The spiritual, David's going, you can't see what's behind me. And neither can his people until David sets the example. Sometimes you've got to be the example and show people where faith is. Show them the GPS of faith because people can't see it. That's the role of the church. When God says you're the light of the world, he's saying, I want you to act like I do things in your life that are unexpected, that are supernatural, that you can trust in something that you can't see. And I want you to walk around and have people go, what's your deal? Be the GPS of faith, church. Show people as a group what it looks like to follow me into the unknown. Show people what it looks like to follow me into places that are scary, into places that you don't understand, into the confusion, into the lostness, and show them that you're not scared, not because I'm going to change it, but because I'm with you. I will never leave you or forsake you. And you can look around and go, I don't know what's going to happen, but my God is with me, and that is enough. His grace is sufficient in the midst of this trial. Be the GPS of faith. And so David walks out in the whole nation, and all of us still, 3,000 years later, looking and going, dang, that's what it looks like. It is now our job. It was their job. It was David's job, and now it's ours. And it's really, really hard to trust God when everything's crashing in on you. But that's when it shines the most. Doggone it. I wish it weren't that way. It just is. And it always will be until he comes and fixes everything. David is able to see with God's eyes. He looks at Goliath and he just looks past it. He is in tune with the Lord. He's got a moment. His anointing is, whatever it means for him to be filled with the Spirit in this moment and go, I don't see that. I'm looking past it. I'm looking with God's eyes. And God has given us that ability because we're filled with the Holy Spirit. The same Holy Spirit that helped David that day, think about that, lives in you all the time if you're a Christian. The same one that we read on these pages. No different. Dang. This day, verse 46, the Lord will deliver you into my hands and I will strike you down and cut off your head. Okay? This very day I will give the carcasses of the Philistine army to the birds and the wild animals, and the whole world will know there's a God in Israel. He's like, not for me, not for anything else, but I want the whole world to know that the impossible just happened, and the only way that happened is because God is behind this. He's a witness. We're witnesses of what we have seen and what we have heard. All those gathered here will know that it's not by sword or spear, the physical, that the Lord saves, for the battle is the Lord's, and he will give us all of you into our hands. That battle language, it's not what you can see. Think about Ephesians when Paul says the battle is not against the flesh and blood, but against spirits and principalities. This is, again, Paul was in the midst of battles, persecution. He's like, it's not about that. There's something going on behind the scenes that we can trust. Verse 48, as the Philistine moved closer to him, David ran quickly toward the battle line to meet him. Reaching into his bag and taking out a stone, he slung it and struck the Philistine in the forehead, 100 miles an hour right to his face. The stone sank into his forehead. He fell face down on the ground. So David triumphed over the Philistine with a sling and a stone. Without a sword in his hand, he struck, again, the author goes, without a sword in his hand, he struck down the Philistine. Notice, remember that the Philistine, when the ark was traveling through Philistine territory a few chapters back, including Gath, Goliath's town, they had like this in my head, like this warehouse of gods. Their main god was called Dagon, and it was like this fish god statue. They bring the ark in and put it next to it, go, oh, we have another god. And the next day they found Dagon face down, and the day after they had found Dagon face down and his head had fallen off. Pretty similar. They never got the message, and Goliath received it here. David wins, by the way. I know I just said that, but after first service, someone goes, can you clarify that? I was like, yeah, Goliath's super dead. So at this part of the narrative, what does the author of 1st and 2nd Samuel want us to know so far about this part of Israel's life and this part of David's life? Super cool. We've gone through it like there's something, there's eyes that God has that we don't have. He looks at the heart. Okay, got it. This king seems to be somebody who sees that way. Like he's looking at things through God's eyes and not his own eyes. He's not trying to get an army to come follow him right now. In fact, he waits. What? So he's humble. He's got righteous anger, and he steps out in faith with the righteous anger fueling him, and God meets him there. And so God saves the nation through this young guy. Period. And there's more. Now I want to read Jesus back into it just a little bit. The parallels, not just prophecy, not just, okay, Jesus is from David's line, not just Jesus was born in his hometown. Those are all really important. But the parallels that we see in this passage to Jesus as we go, Okay, this anticipates Jesus in so many ways. This longs for Jesus in so many ways. First, there's that piece of David, like he spends you're going to see in the next few chapters, he spends a bunch of time in Saul's service and doesn't take the kingship right away. There's a humility and a waiting. Now, David's got a few plans here and there, so he's still a human, but he waits in humility. Jesus waited until he was about 30 years old before his ministry began. Waited. He's king of the entire universe, not just a nation. And he waited. When Jesus finally starts going public with who he is, the anointed one, the Messiah, that role, that prophesied title, that prophesied anointing came with expectations. Israel had an enemy, Rome. They always had an enemy the entire time. They had an enemy as Rome. They expected, among other things, for the Messiah to come and take away the physical enemy. Just like with David, take away the physical enemy. Jesus, being the true champion, the true one in the middle. And here's where the parallels comes. Jesus is the one in the middle. He's the one keeping us from. He's the one saving us from. He's the one saving us to. He's in the middle. Jesus could have taken down Rome and given them temporary relief. Right? Jesus could have called an army of angels and taken them out. He's done that the entire existence of humanity. But for their good, and because he loves us so much, he said, I'm actually going to take care of the real enemy. I'm taking care of Satan. I'm taking care of death. I'm taking care of your sin. Those are the real enemies. So, that you go, well, is this passage about Jesus conquering our Goliaths? Well, only if you're talking about sin, death, or Satan. Those are the enemies that he was taking down. And he knew it was for our good, and he knew people would be confused. And he knew they wouldn't get it, but he did it anyway. The cost to Jesus for doing that, the cost of him standing in the middle, the cross literally, the cost to him, we forget. It's been glorified for good reason because we sing about the cross and things like that, but I want to spend a minute just thinking about Jesus being in between and what he said about his in-betweenness, if I can. So put up verse 16, John 16:33. Jesus with his disciples just before he goes to the cross, before he goes to be the one in between. He says, I've told you these things so that in me you may have peace. In this world you will have trouble, but take heart, I've overcome the world. In this world you will have trouble. And here's that heart piece again, but take heart. Literally, take courage. Take courage, I've overcome the world. He's talking about the physical and the spiritual. He's doing it again. Jesus, in the most cosmic of ways, in this world you're going to have trouble, but take heart, take courage. I won. I'm not going to win. I won. It's over. Victory. It's finished. And while we wait on the victory parade, it's going to be hard. He doesn't tell his disciples, doggone it, why is he leaving trouble behind? You're leaving and you're going to come back and we're going to have a great victory parade and this stuff won't exist anymore. Why'd you leave trouble? He doesn't tell us. He just says, in this world, there's going to be trouble. There's going to be stuff right in front of your face. There's going to be all these things. When those come, take courage. I won. And if I win, we win. If I win, we win. And it's over. Step into that victory when something comes at you. Try to live in that victory. That's where true joy and faith comes from. And he knows it's hard. That's why he kept having to say, don't be afraid so many times. Because we have horrible stuff here still. While we wait on the victory, it's like, man, it's crazy. So I would reread the passage like this. In this world, we're going to have friends and family that die. But take heart, I've overcome death. Scripture says he literally holds the keys to death. He just unlocks it. Thursday, I visited someone from our community in the hospital. Last night, someone from our community went to the hospital. This morning, someone from our community, their brother is not looking good in the hospital. It's just, my mom died a few months ago. It's just, dang it. That's trouble. That's hard. It's painful. It's confusing. And in the midst of that, how can we hang on and go, I'm taking courage. Jesus has overcome this, and one day death won't exist anymore. That better be true. I'm putting all my eggs in that basket. I better see my mom again. Right? In this world, you'll have emotional pain and you're going to experience hurt from other humans. But take heart, I've overcome the world, and one day all tongues, tribes, and nations will be one as I have always wanted. In this world, you're going to have physical pain and cancer and broken bones and ongoing illness. But take heart, I've overcome sickness, and one day you're going to get new bodies and have them forever. I want the band to come up, and I want to read you something that we've read before. It'll take just a few minutes as we are going to respond by taking communion. So I want you to take the cups out from behind the seats in front of you. And we're going to take this in your own time after I read this. But as we talk about the cost of Jesus being the champion, being the one in the middle, being literally the man in the middle, keeping the punishment of sin from us. What's he holding back? What's he fighting? I'm keeping the punishment of sin from you. We're here. It's in front. The punishment, I'm going to hold it back. I'm holding back evil, literally Satan. I'm holding back death, the cost to him. We've read this before. It's by David Platt, and it's fitting. If you want to close your eyes, you can. Just listen, and then we're going to respond together. Our understanding of who God is and who we are drastically affects our understanding of who Christ is and why we need him. For example, if God is only a loving Father who wants to help his people, then we'll see Christ as a mere example of that love, which is good. We'll view the cross just as a demonstration of God's love in which he allowed Roman soldiers to crucify his son so that sinful man would know how much he loves us. But this picture of Christ and the cross is woefully inadequate, missing the entire point of the gospel. We're not saved from our sins because Jesus was falsely tried by Jewish and Roman officials and sentenced by Pilate to die. Neither are we saved because Roman prosecutors thrust nails into the hands and feet of Christ and hung him on a cross. It's not why we're saved. Do we really think that the false judgment of men heaped upon Christ to pay for the debt of all humankind's sin took care of it? Do we really think that a crown of thorns and whips and nails and a wooden cross and all the other facets of the crucifixion that we glamorize are powerful alone enough to save us? Picture Christ in the Garden of Gethsemane. As he kneels before his Father, drops of sweat and blood fall together from his head. Why is he in such agony and pain? The answer is not because he's afraid of crucifixion. He's not trembling because of what Roman soldiers are about to do to him. Since that day, countless men and women in the history of Christianity have died for their faith. Some of them were not just on crosses, they were burned there. Many of them went to their crosses singing. One Christian in India, while being skinned alive, looked at his persecutors and said, "I thank you for this. Tear off my old garment, for I will soon be put on Christ's garment of righteousness." As he prepared to his execution, a man named Christopher Lowe wrote a note to his wife saying, "Today they will sever me from my physical head, but they cannot sever me from my spiritual head, Christ." As he walked to his death, his wife applauded while he sang. Did these men and women in Christian history have more courage than Christ? Why was he trembling in that garden, weeping and full of anguish? We can rest assured that he was not a coward about to face Roman soldiers. Instead, he was a Savior about to endure divine wrath. Listen to his words. "My Father, if it's possible, may this cup be taken from me." The cup is not a reference to a wooden cross. It's a reference to divine judgment. It's the cup of God's wrath. This is what Jesus is recoiling from in the garden. All God's holy wrath and hatred towards sin and sinners stored up since the beginning of the world is about to be poured out on him. And he's sweating blood at the thought of it. What happened at the cross was not primarily about nails being thrust into Jesus' hands and feet, but about the wrath due your sin and my sin being thrust upon his soul. In that holy moment, all the righteous wrath and justice of God due us came rushing down like a torrent on Christ himself. Some say God looked down and couldn't bear to see the suffering that the soldiers were inflicting on Jesus, so he turned away. But this is not true. God turned away because he couldn't bear to see your sin and my sin on his Son. One preacher described it as if you and I were standing a short 100 yards away from a dam of water, 10,000 miles high and 10,000 miles wide. All of a sudden, that dam was breached, and a torrential flood of water came crashing towards us. Right before it reached our feet, the ground in front of us opened up and swallowed it all. At the cross, Christ drank the full cup of God's wrath, and when he had downed the last drop, he turned the cup over and cried out, "It is finished." This is the gospel. The just and loving creator of the universe has looked upon us hopelessly sinful people and sent his son, God in the flesh, to bear his wrath against sin on the cross, to show his power over sin in the resurrection, so that all who trust in him will be reconciled to God forever. He's in the middle. He's done it. And so we're going to take communion and we're going to worship.